Our gospel reading today is one of those readings that we preachers sometimes dread, because there's so much going on and it raises so many questions, good questions, questions that we have to wrestle with, and it's not entirely clear what the solution to those questions might be, and yet we have a very limited amount of time to try and get to all of them. And as much as I would love to get to all of them, today's a potluck day, so I'm not going to do that. I will tell you what it raises, though, and just let them sit there, is when we read this as modern readers, it kind of just seems like Jesus is being mean. Is he being mean? What tone? We don't know the tone of voice. Is he being sarcastic? That's another theory. Maybe he's being sarcastic. He's trying to poke fun at the disciples. Maybe he's trying to model for the disciples the sort of consequences, what it actually looks like if their ideas were actually played out in real life, and how cruel they could be. All possibilities, but we don't know. And if anything, our theorizing, and I think today many preachers are going to get up who have to preach in the lectionary, and they're going to give most of their congregation some sort of theory, like, oh, well, he's probably being sarcastic. He's probably trying to teach the disciples a lesson so that all of you can go like this, oh, okay, I feel better now. Unfortunately, you have a mean pastor who's not going to do that. I don't know. I don't know why Jesus does this. I don't know the tone of voice. I can't tell you for certain that he's just trying to teach a lesson. So you're just going to have to sit with some of that. And I think that's the real point, the real lesson, the real thing about this story in the gospel that disturbs us a little bit. And notice what happens with this woman, with her constant going to Jesus, asking Jesus a question, giving Jesus a request, returning to him time and time again, is that it keeps Jesus there. And it also keeps the disciples there. And it keeps the woman there. Notice what happens even when we read this story and we start sitting with all of those possibilities. Wow, what tone was Jesus saying this word? Why was he saying this? What possibly could be the meaning? Is that when you allow yourself to just ponder those questions without skipping immediately to some solution or to some theory, well, now you actually have to stay with this story a little bit longer. The minute I give you some theory that calms your feeling of doubt or your feeling of uncomfortability about this story, what are you going to do? You're going to forget about this story. You're going to move on. Okay, well, now we can go on to the next chapter of Matthew, because now I kind of got this one figured out. The minute we have something figured out, we move on. But this beautiful scene, this difficult scene, actually draws everyone involved a little bit closer into Jesus. The woman gets closer physically with every question that she asks Jesus, with every challenge that Jesus gives back to her. She doesn't run away. She actually physically gets closer and closer. The disciples, they're ready to go. They've got an appointment to make. Jesus, send her away. She's keeping us. They too have to get in a little bit closer. When we sit with the questions, the confusion, the oddity of this story, we actually lean in a little bit and we get a little bit closer. There's a statistic that in the 4 gospel accounts, Jesus asks something like over 300 questions. We focus a lot on what Jesus teaches, the clarity of his teaching, but also he asks a lot of questions. And a lot of people ask him questions, and he doesn't always give good answers, or answers we would like back. Kind of similar to this story, where he keeps giving the woman a sort of a challenging answer that makes her ask again, makes her get closer. This portion of Matthew's gospel comes after a series that we've been reading of Jesus teaching these parables and responding to Pharisees and getting all of these requests. And the disciples do the same thing that they do in this scene with the woman. They want Jesus to send all of these questioning, debating, challenging people away. When the people, the crowd that are gathered hearing Jesus get hungry and they're looking for food, the disciples tell Jesus, tell them to go home and find their own food. And Jesus says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep them here. Right before this story, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees and him are asking each other questions and debating, and the disciples start getting nervous, and they say to Jesus, Jesus, don't you see that you're offending them? The disciples are really skittish about questions. Questions people ask Jesus, and the sort of strange questions and responses Jesus gives back, almost egging them on, inviting them in. But that's exactly what Jesus does, time and time again, is invite people to stay with the question and to get closer. That's an important model for us, because sometimes we've gotten into the myth that to be someone who asks questions of God, someone who even gets maybe impatient with God like this woman, someone who maybe even challenges God, is somehow a sign of unfaithfulness, is a sign of misunderstanding, is a sign of someone who has a lot of doubt, a sign of someone who is certainly not the model Christian. And yet, throughout the scriptures, the people like this woman, the Canaanite woman, who actually approach God with challenge and with seeking questions that are unrelenting, challenges that are unrelenting, are precisely the people that God turns around and says, you of great faith. This woman's questioning, her persistence, her nagging even, her boldness to challenge God, to stick with God, to keep having this conversation with God, no matter how uncomfortable it might be to the disciples. Like, I really wish you want to talk to Jesus that way. For Jesus is a sign of deep, abiding trust. Just as it was when Abraham challenged God and said, well, surely if there are 10 left in that city, then you should spare them, God. Jesus makes reference to the children of Israel, which literally means to wrestle, to fight with God. The people of God's covenantal promise are the people who are docile, who don't ask difficult questions, who are quiet, who keep quiet. The people, the very literal name of the people who are God's people of promise, of covenant, means the people who fight with God. And yet, where have we now read the scriptures and today in the 21st century looked at the same people who challenge, who ask difficult questions, who say, I'm not so sure, who say, I'm angry with God, I'm really angry at why he would do something like this, that I don't understand this. The people that question the scriptures, that ask the difficult questions and don't pawn it off on simple solutions, we look at them and we say, well, you just don't have any faith. You just got to believe. To believe is to trust in a God that you can go to like this woman and say, Lord, even the dogs will take the crumbs. That is a boldness that we as Christians have been grafted on to the people of Israel, the people who fight, who wrestle, who strive with God, because it draws us in. It gathers us in. When we ask questions of God, we now have a relationship with God. We are like Job, who also questioned God, was angry with God. And in fact, Job's one request of God is, God, I just want to see you face to face. I just want to know where you are because I've got some things to say to you. These are our heroes of faith. People who want to find God because they want to yell at God to his face. Where has our boldness gone to ask questions, to be a people and to be a church that lets people come in and say, all right, what do you got? Give God and give us your best shot. What questions do you have? What burning, yearning requests do you have? Churches have become like the disciples, scared of questions. We run away from them. It makes us uncomfortable. But the good news is that all the way from the patriarchs, from Abraham in Israel to Job, to the psalmists that we read every Sunday, to this Canaanite woman, a model of deep and abiding faith is the person who asks the really hard questions. And that is good news for us, friends, because we human beings are naturally curious. And when we let that curiosity, that deep thought, those deep questions bubble up, God will not run away. Some of your friends might run away. And they might give you some banal platitudes and just say, well, God has a plan, so that you'll shut up, because they're uncomfortable. But God will not run away. Your questions will be God's opening to draw you in closer and say, come closer, though. Let's talk about this. That is a beautiful gift for us human beings who have a lot of questions. So, trying to wrap it up here. Our questioning, curious spirit, that boldness, is not a defect of the faith. It is a great gift that gathers you in closer to God. God will not be offended. God will just invite you closer. So here are some things of how we can live this out. First of all, as a congregation, my hope is that we as a congregation will not be like the disciples who get scared of questions. I hope that we foster that here. I encourage you to continue fostering that here. That when you are in study with one another, in prayer with one another, in conversation with one another, that you allow one another to just say, you know, I'm not so sure. Or this thing really bothers me. You're not going to have an answer for him. I'd say don't give him an answer sometimes. You have my commitment that if you, like this woman, have questions that are really eating you up, that I will not run away. I will not tell you your questions are wrong, or that you just need to have more faith. I won't have all the answers for you, but I will gladly draw closer. And I will gladly talk to you about them. And this too. Questions are also the way that we open up relationships with one another. We will continue to have sort of surface level relationships with one another if we never ask each other good questions. That's kind of a skill set that we don't really train each other on in the church. You maybe learn that skill set elsewhere. But today you can practice it. A church that actually grows in real relationships with one another is a church where we sit down at potlucks and we don't just stay with the easy questions of, well, how was your week? What do you do for a living? That's important information. But to get comfortable, and it's really awkward, so I know, it's really awkward to sit down with a stranger, to sit down with someone else in the congregation, and to ask a more difficult question. What was really hard for you this week? What brought you joy this week? Where did you see God this week? Why are you here at Messiah? What brought you here? Those questions create relationships rather than acquaintances. Just in the same way that our questioning relationship with God is what deepens our relationship with God and takes it from that surface to something deeper that the Canaanite woman was able to experience. So practice a deeper question with one another. And last, this, because we've got students who are returning to school this year, especially looking at our older students, our teens, our young adults here. By my calculation, I've been in school for 75% of my life. And, not to brag and all, but, I was pretty much top of class every time, so, saying that. But here's what I learned, is that the people who were really the smartest, the best in class, were not the ones that actually knew everything. They were the ones who asked questions. This is a great gift that God has implanted in each human being. Be bold in your questions this school year. The one who asks good questions, who maybe asks questions that even they think this is a dumb question, I'm not going to ask it. Ask it. The one who asks the professor for help, that asks a friend for help, that asks another member of this congregation for help, for tutoring, for advice. Those are the ones who do well in school, are the ones who are constantly asking questions. They're the ones that annoy the teacher sometimes, right, Melissa? Yeah, for asking too many questions. But you know what? Those kids end up doing pretty well, right? Yeah, they're annoying. Okay. But they do well. And also this last little thing, especially for my older folks in the room. Don't give up your gift of curiosity too quickly. It is now becoming very, very easy for us to have a question and to pull out our phone and to have a response in a second. But what that does is it takes away that striving, that wrestling, that using this God-given gift to discover the answer to a question on your own. Our new technologies are a gift. Use them wisely. But remember that your curiosity is a God-given gift, not a human-made gift. It is a God-given gift. A gift for you in your spiritual life, but a gift for you in your daily life. Do not let a machine do what God has given for you to do. Keep practicing solving problems with the God-given machinery that you have been given. This woman comes to Jesus and she draws nearer and nearer to him because Jesus' answers are a little difficult. The questions are difficult. May you discover this week that your questions, your doubts, your curiosities, your burning questions are not a defect of your faith. They are not a barrier to your faith. They are invitations to a God who will not run away and to a God who is always drawing you closer. Amen.